My name is Mario Violich. I'm a principal at Morley Dell, and I've been part of this practice since I came out of school in 1989. So you can do the math. It's 2689, so many years, 30, 35, over 35 years. So the Pacific Palisades house is a reconstruction project of a home that our clients lost in the Palisades fire a little over a year ago. It is part of a neighborhood of houses in an area called the Pacific Highlands. And these are homes that were built in the 1970s. The project is about just a little over 3,000 square foot home on a very compact site. So these are homes that were built in the 70s on tracks that were, fairly narrow, fairly dense. And the goals of the project were unique to the circumstance, right? Our clients didn't come to me and to MRY because out of choice. They came out of necessity. They lost their home. They wanted to get back in their home as quickly as possible. Because obviously, having lost everything, they wanted to reduce the amount of time of having to live in other homes. Their kids were displaced because they went to Palisades High School, and Palisades High School burned down significantly. So this was all about get us back into our home as quickly as possible. So what was interesting about this project is that while we were approached by the clients with respect to their property, it was very apparent to us that they were really representing not only their interests, but the interests of their neighborhood. You can imagine if you lose your home in a neighborhood you've been in for 20, 25 years, you're going to be thinking about others, your neighbors that have also lost their assets. So very quickly, it was apparent to us that as we engaged our clients, it was very important to engage their neighbors. And the other reason it was important, or our instinct was to engage within a collective, is that if you think about environmental resiliency, you leverage initiatives around resiliency at the scale of the neighborhood versus the scale of a single home. So that was really the impetus. And so we actually started, after we met with our clients, a few weeks later, we invited their neighbors. So we had 4 families here at our office to talk about their needs, their aspirations, their losses, and to really help cultivate a conversation around resiliency at the community scale as opposed to the individual family scale. Well, there are 2 things about the condition of the site. There was the condition of the immediate site where the house had burned down, and then there was the condition of the regional landscape. And the reason why the 2 scales were important is that their memory, their sense of what they lost and what they could have back lay in the extent to which they could connect back to the views, to the climate, to the sense of place that the regional landscape and the neighborhood landscape represented. So it was pretty clear to us that whatever we did on the design of this home, it really had to frame, reaffirm, and highlight those aspects of the regional landscape and the neighborhood that were so important to them. I would say there was one other aspect that was really, to this day, a little bit challenging, and this has to do with artifact. So this is a fire that came in, a firestorm really, because they're at the up in the highlands, so the fire came right off the ridge, and so it incinerated everything, except it did not destroy certain things. There's a flagstone pathway in their entry garden that is there to this day, that survived, and there is a sycamore tree that is still thriving today. So those artifacts were very important to them, and so they wanted to. They are asking us to kind of say, well, okay, rebuild this beautiful home, but is there a way that you can integrate in some way the artifacts of what withstood the fire? Well, a really key part of that had to do with the fact that the owners had lived in this home and on this piece of land for over 20 years. So it was less about the building, the home, the architecture itself, and it was a lot about the microclimates. So what was amazing working with these owners was they could tell us that in late August, if you are on the northeast corner of the property at between 4 and 6 p.m., you will be in the lee of the predominant winds coming from the ocean up to the site. Or they would say, in our 20 years of living on this piece of land and in this home, we knew that we could, on the southeast corner of the site, we could be in a place where we get morning sun, where we're eating breakfast. And so a lot of times in architecture, you invest as much as you can into understand the nuances of climate and wind and solar orientation, shade, thermal comfort, right? We spend so much time researching that, and it tends to be an abstract, data-driven thing. In this case, the clients had 20 years of data all in their heads and all based on direct experience. And so they were able to translate that to us. What that meant was that as we were shaping the house and modulating the facade and the massing to create these microclimates within and outside the home, they could reflect that deep knowledge of living on that piece of land. That was a huge advantage in terms of fitting the architecture and its adjoining landscape to the nuances of the microclimate that influenced it. I think as architects, we often focus on the building envelope itself and less about the infrastructure, less about what's below grade and how water gets to a site and how resources are made available to a particular client in the case of a catastrophic event like the Palisades fire. So I would say that would be one thing that it's gotten me to think about, is that when you design a home or any building for that matter, any project, that you think about what is the infrastructure that feeds this property? Like, where's the water coming from? What's the path of travel for a fire truck? How resilient are the neighboring structures and the neighboring landscape to a catastrophic event? So I think in some ways it's gotten me to think at a different scale than just the single family home and the property, is to think about the infrastructure that feeds it. Certainly in terms of materiality and fire prevention, one thing that was very clear to us is that during the Palisades fire, from the research that we've done, a huge percentage of the fires that ignited these homes were from embers that traveled miles. So you have a fire 3 miles away, of which produced embers that were airborne and then traveled in 89 mile per hour winds landing on structures like the structure of our client's home. And when those embers land, they typically land where they can be caught. So an eave, for example, that has a pocket of space is a perfect candidate for an ember to get caught, and then once it gets underneath the envelope of the building, the eave, then it ignites the structure. So we started to think a little bit more about how the mass of a building and how its detailing, its eaves and ridges and modulation is designed in such a way that it doesn't exacerbate that problem of wind-blowing embers being caught and accelerating a fire just because of the way the building is designed. So those are some things that we thought about. It factored in a big way, partially because this home that we designed, that's in construction in the Palisades, is part of 6 homes on a cul-de-sac. And 4 of the 6 homes were obliterated by the fire. The 2 that survived were adjacent to a grove of redwood trees. And it was the oddest thing, like, because you see 2 homes that are perfectly preserved, the roses and the garden and the lawn are still there to this day, the mailbox. And then the homes right next to it, the 4, one of which was our client's home, completely burned to the ground. And so what was apparent to many of us and further explained is that the grove of redwood trees created a buffer to the windward force of the fire. And so you could see in that example the important role of landscape, not as something that creates fuel for a fire, but rather actually creates a buffer to a fire. And so what we've done, what we did early on was to engage the homeowners association in this particular neighborhood and the neighbors in a landscape commons concept. And the landscape commons idea was to work at scale on landscape. So we designed a palette of trees that we knew that are especially resilient to wildfires, like California toyons, California sycamores, oaks, manzanita, etc. And those are now the first phase of that landscape commons that covers both our client's property, homeowners association property, and in phase 2 will cover and be extended to their neighboring property. So this is an example, I think, of where landscape at scale can really play a really important role in terms of resiliency. That's a good question. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion around how close plant material can be to a home, because you don't want it so close that it creates fuel for the fire to accelerate the fire. But by the same token, if you imagine like a substantial setback of landscape away from a home, then you don't have the benefit of that adjacency for the experience, for the way you experience a home. One thing that we tried to do was to employ a borrowed landscape idea. And so with this particular home, it has these amazing views to the regional landscape: sycamores, toyons, ceanothus, manzanita, and it has a very particular geology. Like, it's very identified. You look at the Santa Monica Mountains and you look at an outcrop, it's like unmistakable. That is like a classic California landscape. So when we designed the home, we really looked for opportunities to foreground that kind of landscape. Thus the concept borrowed landscape, that if we can create a home where there's enough foreground and the home has these, it's shaped in such a way where rooms and gardens alternate. So when you walk through the front entry, you go from garden, and there's a room, the piano, library, then there's a courtyard looking out at that regional landscape, then there's a living room, and then it goes back to a garden. So that syncopation of interior architecture and garden became a really important design concept to make sure that the view of the distant landscape is accentuated by the foregrounding of these gardens that are made of the same material as the distant landscape. And we're even bringing boulders from a local quarry to these gardens that are the same geology as the rock outcrops in the distance. So this was the idea to really bridge the foreground landscape to the regional landscape as a really important part of the architectural experience. I think the change is an architect being a lot more community focused in terms of how they approach an individual project. So rather than, say, a conventional process where the architect is really servicing the needs of an individual client, instead they're looking at the individual client and their property within the ecosystem of a larger community. I think that's definitely a shift. The homeowners association has asked us to participate in advising the association, as an architect, on best practices with regards to resiliency. So I would say, like when I went to school in architecture, the emphasis was on how an architect can fulfill their clients' mission, aspirations, needs. Today, I think an architect has to be well-versed in changing that paradigm and saying, how can I become an agent of the larger community as well as my individual client? If you imagine, you've lost everything, you've raised your family, every experience you've had, and as a family for 20 years, that place, that physical setting has been obliterated and gone. By any measure, that's a traumatic experience, right? So being able to reinvest and recover from that is a community endeavor. You can't recover from that, I don't think. I'm just speaking less as an architect and more just as a person. You can't recover from that on your own. So the catharsis and the agency that a community that is supporting each other gives to those who are recovering, both from trauma and also from loss of assets, I think is really significant. And so I think that if there's any lesson that this project has helped me understand, is that we need to think opportunistically about this idea of how to balance public access and private property. And obviously there's an ecological component and a resiliency component that comes with that. So I think there's a lot of reasons why it's important to, as an architect, to invest in how your project makes the neighborhood and the environment around it better. I think one of the more gratifying aspects for me and our team that's worked on this project has been to kind of remind ourselves of what the purpose and value of architecture is. When you have clients who come to you not because they want to work with an architect, but because they have to, you start to realize that what you do as an architect, it has meaning and it has value, and that in order to make sure that that meaning and value is appreciated by a client, you really have to be able to understand where they're coming from and what their needs are. The part of that has been especially meaningful to me is this idea that these people who came to us have reaffirmed their ties to this piece of land. They've reaffirmed their the value that they associate with this, and it's through the architecture, it's through the designing of the homes, it's through the framing of the views, it's through the spatial relationships of the home to the larger landscape in their neighborhood that reaffirmation has taken place.